to a population of 450 or whatever, or will we continue to have 500 and maybe grow from there? That can have a serious impact in what we write and what we think is going to be the future of our valley.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, if you know the answer to that,
I think that's definitely my crystal ball.
I was going to say you're smarter than me, but you are all smarter than me. But you understand you understand the question, you know, and it is a very significant question. Are we going to have a population of 450 people, more or less steady, or is it going to be 550 people or more?
Right.
You know, it's a huge question.
Yeah. So Tara, since we have your expertise here, given all of our kind of conundrums, how would you recommend that we move forward with this project?
I was gonna comment on Mike's question too, is don't you think it'll be something in between? Don't you think something in between would be a safe guess? That there'll be some people that say, gee, this is a great quality of life, we want to stay here, and others that miss some of the urban amenities and go back.
Tara, the other question you have to ask is what has happened in the last 4 or 5, 6 months or whatever. People have gotten used to working remotely, and our valley is a great place to work remotely from because we have good, strong internet, which provides good, strong Wi-Fi for houses and so on. A year from now, or a year and a half from now, our business is going to go back to a model of people coming into the office 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times a week. Or are we going to stay with a model of working very mainly from remotely, maybe going into the office once a week or once a month?
Yeah, I think that's going to be something in between too, and varying with the field. I mean, I know some departments are giving up their spaces and going totally remote, but some.
Tara, I understand that if I were a betting person, which I'm not, I would actually lean that it's not going to be in between. I think you're going to see a lot more people working remotely, businesses taking advantage of reduced office space, and so on, so on, so on. That's my guess. But, you know, I think we'll know a whole lot more, hopefully in 7 or 8 months, God willing, when we have a legitimate vaccine and people have been vaccinated and so on. We can go back to or create whatever the truly new normal is going to be. You know, that's just, you know, my talking to a lot of professionals in what I used to do as an accountant, as a financial advisor. It's going to be more and more doing things over the phone, doing things over remote and everything else. But that's just my feel, and I guess your feel. But what if we're wrong? And what if we do drop back to 450?
Yeah,
we talk to people up in. Do you handle Jackson?
We saw a little bit of a bump. I mean, after 9/11,
Nothing like this.
Not a huge one, and it was sustainable. But I think, and we're seeing growth in the Connecticut River Valley and both states. We're seeing farms that were on the market for years and bought up, even have contacts in Gorham that are getting inquiries. You guys have seen a bigger increase, I think, than is typical. And I'm guessing that's because you have so many second homes.
Yeah, and the amenities and infrastructure to support that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's
To answer your question, Wendy, I think my recommendation would be to keep working on the background for the different topics and public input, and like you said, meeting with stakeholders. But I think it's reasonable to wait 6 months before you talk about recommendations and policies to see, how things settle out. Do we have a vaccine that's effective? Is going to be a huge factor for everybody's planning.
So I guess the
If I
question
could
is, for
comment.
everyone, oh, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, this is Rich. Just a couple quick things related, but not exactly on the master plan. Just at the top of my head, I wanted to remind myself and the rest of the board about one thing I know that the select board is really beginning to wrestle with is the impact this is going to have on infrastructure, a larger number of people in terms of water, trash, sewage, staffing. Number of people, can we sustain our level of operations with a larger population, or do we need to hire more people? There's also a question of maintenance and repair, which gets me to the planning board, and that I'm moving into the CIP. I think we're going to have to, as a board, really relook at that particular. I think we may want to start almost by throwing a lot of it out. If we're going to have these numbers of people, which we don't know, we're going to get a lot more wear and tear on our physical plan. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that little bit up.
No, that's a huge point.
I made the recommendation to those that I've been working with on the subcommittees that we postpone our submission or our work on the master plan for a year, because what we're dealing with here is overwhelming uncertainty. That's what we've been talking around. And that the impacts that the COVID crisis has had on business is truly significant. And just to give you one example, there's the office tower where one of our suppliers works in New York. It's 35 stories. Only 20% of the people who work in this building doing office work agreed to take COVID tests and agreed to return to office work because of the tower is recirculated air. The impact on New York City real estate has been drastic. And the attitude of workers has been that if they can possibly work remotely and not go to an office and not travel on public transit, that they will do it. And that this, well, for the time being, permanent. Nobody's changing their attitude. And as another example, in my company, we have discontinued our lease agreement. We no longer have an office, and all of our staff is working remotely.
Right.
So I think these are truly significant changes, and I don't think that COVID is by any stretch going away. This is a permanent condition. We're going to be living with this virus as we do with all these other viruses permanently. And whether we get a vaccine or not, I think we will have a vaccine. And the question becomes, will it be manufactured to scale? Who will get it first? Will it function as well as the claims have been made, et cetera? So that's where we are. I think that we're not exactly wasting time, but I don't think that collecting data about what has happened in the past is going to point to the future. So that's why I made my recommendation.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that we don't know what's going to be happening in the near or even perhaps on information to get a foundation of where we've been at, because everything else, I feel like that could be useful for the future. So that seems to be a step that we could take if people are willing to invest the time in it.
That's okay, but all I'm trying to indicate is that data now about the future, data of the past, doesn't significantly point to what will be the future.
One of the things we discussed in responding to Bill and to you, Wendy, early on and rejected, I had mentioned that it was an online, I was going to say Zoom, it was a webinar in which the master planning process was discussed. And one of the recommendations they made was to potentially divide it up. Some chapters can be done more easily than others. And I think, Tara, you had said that you did not think that that was a good way to do it. I wonder if you want to revisit that, where perhaps some chapters may be more easily done or less impacted by current events than others. I just throw that out as a discussion point. I am not advocating for it myself.
I mean, I think that's probably true with something like natural resources. It's hard to think of many that it's going to be true for. Maybe in land use. My point in that is when you have different committees bring in chapters from beginning to end, it's not a comprehensive plan in the end, right? I mean, I always look at kind of all the socioeconomic background, the population, housing, economics, and what's on the land, like kind of the natural resources and land use limitations, development limitations, and public input, and put those together, and that makes the land use plan, and then out of that is the facilities plan. What facilities do we need to serve that land use? So to me, it doesn't live in these separate chapters. It's a big flowchart and process. That's the point I was making.
You know,
I mean, I wouldn't
want
recommend putting it on hold a year. I think, some of you made a good start, and I'd hate to see you lose that momentum. And I think working on the parts you can, like the background information and maybe something like natural resources, and then see where we're at in 6 months is probably reasonable.
it's a very interesting situation that we have. If you go back to March and you take a look at the town, and I sit on the school board, the school budgets that we put up and passed in early March, both the school and I assume the town are sitting here with budgets that were passed that if we did it today, those budgets would be drastically different because of the pressure that's been put on town resources and the incredible pressure that's been put on school resources. And we're still sitting here with a budget that was passed at a time when the world was different. We don't know what the world's going to be in 6 or 7 months. And I think it's going to have a serious impact on how we write our master plan. So postponing 6 months, that at least 6 months makes sense to me.
But we aren't entirely talking about just putting a tack in it and walking away for 6 months. I think what Tara's recommending is.
No. I'm not recommending that.
Okay.
I think six months means that we're kind of putting a tack in it and said, okay, in 6 months, we will be ready to be done. That means that we are working during that time frame. We are we may have multiple versions. But sitting here and saying, okay, in 6 months, which I guess is March, February, March, we're sitting here and saying, okay, we're there. This is what we have. And this is where we go with. We can't put this thing off indefinitely.
Right. So Tara, you don't feel like us splitting up into separate groups is the most effective way. How would you recommend that we move forward in being able to target the things that we can get the most solid background on? What would you recommend? Because it seems like what we're doing now really isn't working well.
Well, I think pretty quickly you need to put all the background pieces together and to answer that question.
So has everyone with their groups established the background information?
And then somebody is going to organize all that, right, into something. And I think I've shared some examples in the past with you. Do that again of examples of some different ways, different towns have organized things.
I think the way we've divided it now is working, albeit very slowly. The different chapters are being worked on. I think if we continue, just working on what we can work on, and perhaps, I don't know, just top of my head, at the 4-month mark, we see where we are, whether we think we'll be ready to make, presentations at the 6-month mark. Something like that perhaps may be a way to go.
I think you need to be looking at land use as land use as a group. I don't even know what your sections are or who's doing it. I think once you've kind of put together the economics and the socioeconomic background and the natural resources and looked at the capacity of the land, I think you need to be doing the land use plan all together as one committee. And then out of that comes transportation and facilities.
Well, I think we have as one of the 2 members of the land use master plan revision. Nancy, please speak up. I think we've got a good start going. I think we may have shared actually a lot of what we had done several months ago, and we could do that again. I really hasn't advanced much due to other concerns, other tasks that need to be done. But I don't know, Nancy, what do you think?
I think that it is next to impossible for an entire group to write anything. But what it sounds like is that you're thinking that the chapters should be done in a particular order in order to inform other chapters.
Right, and I'm not talking about a group writing it. I don't know how you work that out. To be honest, I haven't seen very many successful volunteer master plan efforts. I'm used to facilitating the process, and I write the plan and I work with the board to develop the recommendations and policies. So that's kind of the process I think about, that you've divided up writing the background, but you need to work together to develop the policies. And the economics and the population, the natural resources, the capacity of the land are all things that inform the land use plan. The master plan really is the land use plan. And then the transportation of facilities, well, what if that's going to be our land use, what do we need for facilities? And that's what Rich is getting at with the CIP needs to be based on your facilities plan, which needs to be based on your land use, which needs to be based on the natural resources, the economics, the population, the housing. They don't all kind of exist in silos is my point.
You're hired, Tara.
That makes sense.
Let's work out the details.
Well, I think your budget cut is part of the detail of that. But yeah, I mean, there have been some successful volunteer efforts, but more often than not, they run into these kind of problems.
I'd hate to see a simple thing, not quite rightly said, a simple thing like money keep us from putting together an excellent master plan by a professional in the field, frankly. So perhaps it's something we can look at if you're interested as well. At least if you have the time, at least some elements of it that you think would be really good for you to participate in.
Well, the board needs to work on that with Mark, but it's definitely covered by our current agreement. Like, the current agreement basically is when you ask for something, I give an idea what it's going to cost and do it, and to check in with Mark on the money end of it. That's how we work right now.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, you've been trying to make a point?
Well, I kind of like the idea of us doing the background work and collecting the information and putting it together in a kind of cohesive format, but not going as far as working out all of our recommendations for the future, and instead doing that as a group. That sounds like that's what you're suggesting, Tara, and that we even hand over the background information to you to massage before we go to the recommendation phase?
That would be a fine approach. I also always have the policy of giving you a little bit of free feedback on things you do yourself for any of my client towns. If you do something yourself, I'm not gonna do it in the detail of kind of rewriting it, but I'll give some, if you wanna run the background sections by me, I'm happy to take, you know, my idea is if it doesn't take more than a half an hour, then I'm not gonna bill you. And I like to support volunteer efforts. So my feedback might be, here's where you can find some other information on that. Have you thought about that? You know, other things to think about. So, I mean, it's certainly possible to do it in partnership.
So I do think, and I appreciate your sentiment, Rich, that the budget shouldn't get in the way, but we do know what we're all working with here. So I think perhaps if we can get everyone to agree, well, first off, has any group really had not been able to meet? I know the town is more than willing to help set up Zoom meetings. We need to make sure that everyone can meet. Are there any hiccups there in ability to meet? Everyone should be able to pull things, you know, come together a little bit in your subcommittees. I think it would be great if we could get the background information to Nick to send to Tara. If that makes sense.
And has everybody had an opportunity to see the examples from other towns to get ideas of, you know, it might remind you to, oh gee, we haven't included that, or we didn't think about this yet. Has everybody seen those examples that I've sent around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Has anyone not seen those examples? Okay, I think we're good. So would everyone be in favor of moving forward like that? We could perhaps set a different deadline. Well, and depending, of course, Tara, what your availability is, could everyone kind of pull your things together within the next 2 weeks and then send in your information to Nick to send to Tara so it would be the 27th. And then would that be too tight of a turnaround, Tara, for you to be able to just bring everything together a little bit in like a week or so we would have the chance to look at it before the following meeting?
No, that's fine. That works.
Does that make sense to everyone? Do I need to come around to people's homes and collect your homework?
Wear your mask.
What's that?
When you come around, wear your mask.
Yeah, and have a COVID test before you come.
Always. So to avoid all that, if y'all would just electronically submit to Nick, let's say by the 27th, maybe we'll get extra points if you do it before the 27th. And then Nick could send it on to Tara. I think the biggest thing is that there's going to be a lot of information flying around. And I'd like us all to at least have a week to digest it before we sit down to try to talk intelligently about it.
And I think having it all together would be really helpful because that would let me see any conflicts and gaps.
Okay.
I still recommend that we use OneDoc so that you don't have to send around giant files. And then you can just have one page with all the links. And that way it's together, but yet not sitting on your own computer.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on OneDoc?
Yeah, Mark set it up for us. So it's not like we have to set it up. And if you have Word, or even if you don't have Word, you can work on one doc using Word. But if you have Word, you can you can work on it on your computer, and it automatically saves it to this shared document, so everyone else can see what you've done and track your changes. And you can view it as either with the track changes or without the track changes. And because you sign into OneDoc, it will say who made what change.
So it's a little bit like Google Docs.
Yeah, it is, only it uses Word, which is a much better document management tool. And
I don't think I have access to that.
well, I think Nick, you saw what what I forwarded to Nick, who forwarded to you, the chapter on recreation and culture. So try clicking on it and see what happens.
I mean, while we were meeting or at 8,
Well, so why don't,
I haven't seen any chapters. I think he sent me some as you were starting a meeting this morning.
so why don't I get with Mark and make sure that we have the OneDoc available to everybody, and we'll stick with those timelines. Perhaps, Nick, you could mark your calendar to send a reminder around to everyone on the 24th. That's a Monday.
Okay.
Unless if anyone has any issues with this, we'll shoot for the 27th to submit what you have to Nick, so he can get them right over to Tara. Everyone good? I don't see very many smiles. Everyone good?
What date did you say? I missed that.
The 2 weeks, so the 27th would be the 2 Thursdays from now.
So, hi, John Racine here. So to be clear, in my mind, we're going to send over what we have now only. Don't work on anything else other than what we have only to Tara. Is that correct?
Yeah, the background, anything that you've established from stakeholder conversations, yeah.
Okay.
Tara, is there any kind of a format you'd like us all to work in? Like bullet points versus chapter writing?
No, I mean, I'm gonna give you general comments on whatever you've done.
Okay, so we have a plan. Plan for the plan. Everyone ready to move on, or any other comments on the master plan? Okay. So for the short-term rentals group that Mike Capel so graciously is heading up, in reviewing from our last month's discussion, I did ask him to hold off on actually meeting with the members, because I don't feel like we really outlined the goals for the group. And I know last time Mike had let us know that Terry and Mike Aronson would be joining him in the group. But I wanted to make sure that there are clear goals. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of time wasted. So everyone, well, some of us are really busy and we're all juggling a lot. So Mike, perhaps you'd want to start with where your head was at with what you think would be good.
I've done some research in the last couple of months. And it's kind of interesting. And one of the things that has become really interesting, and I've gotten a lot of input from Rob and other people regarding hockey. And it's kind of interesting when you push the numbers and everything else, and all of it, how double-edged sword hockey is. But on an average hockey tournament requires approximately 324 rooms. So that's one issue. Whether you like hockey, don't like hockey, it does bring a significant number of dollars, Wendy.
Yeah.
It brings a significant number of dollars into the valley and also causes some issues. And most of us understand both. But we have to start off by saying 324 rooms in a weekend is a tremendous number, which we don't have. Just as a short-term rental question, issue, statement, whatever you want to call
So would we be fair in saying perhaps one of the goals of your group would be to assess what is available and as well as assess the need?
it. Absolutely true. So we know the need, we just don't know the assessment. And I'll try and get a hold of Jan Stearns or somebody to find out exactly what's available. Because one of the other interesting things in talking to people is that the number of rooms, for example, at Black Bear or Golden Eagle, which are two of the most obvious, has gone down a little bit because all of a sudden some people are now living there that didn't previously. So the number of rooms available has kind of decreased, and we have to figure out what we'll go back to, whether that's going to be long-term, short-term, we have no idea. But what is currently available, we have to see and how that affects this. We have to talk to the new owner. I'm assuming everybody knows that the Snowy Owl has been sold. What his intent is in that area, what he does or does not intend to do as far as hockey goes and everything else. They have a lot of rooms, we all know, and that could add significantly to what is available. And what he's going to do or not going to do with regard to Freedom Pass and so on also comes into play. Some of the places, Black Bear, for example, does not allow its owners to use Airbnb. My understanding that was passed by all the owners over there. Golden Eagle, on the other hand, if you go out to Airbnb, Golden Eagle does allow Airbnb for various reasons.
Right. So
Some of the condos have gone and put specific restrictions as to minimum length of stay. High Country, for example.
right. So that would all fall under that one goal.
Yeah, I have nothing else to do. So. With regard to the
just to
but all of these things, we have to figure out what we have, what we want to have, and then figure out if we want to have more, how we get there.
More what? What is the definition?
Is that a planning board goal? I guess I thought your goal when you started talking about it was to decide how you want to define it for the zoning ordinance. Because right now, and I could share that document that I reviewed with you again if it'd be helpful, but where you're at is you don't define short-term rentals, so you don't have any.
Yeah, but if all we want to do is define short-term rental, that's easy. But we can have a discussion of short-term rental 3 days or a week.
No, I don't think so. I think you need to be doing it with your end goal in mind. But the two need to go together. I mean, but just need to think about the supply. You need to think about what feels residential in a residential neighborhood. That's the other side of that coin.
Well, but isn't when you talk about residential, are you talking about what the term of residence is?
I'm talking about the difference between living next to a home that's occupied by one family all year or part of the year versus somebody different every week or weekend. And typically when we write those definitions, whether we talk about it as a home business or what's residential versus transient or what's short-term rental, however you decide to define it, that's what you're determining is when has that.
Addressed, though, isn't it? And
But we were talking about short-term rentals, and that's what I'm saying is, so it's typical for our community to decide that a certain level of short-term rental is just accessory to owning a residence, but that there's another level that may be more like a home business where somebody might need to come in for a permit of some kind. And there's another level that's commercial and doesn't even belong there.
Right. And I think the biggest thing that we need help with starting, Mike, is what you were talking about initially, and just really knowing what the availability is and what our potential need is. in the
Let us try and take that first as a first step. I think a lot of the things that Tara was talking about are extraordinarily important, especially in today's situation. Let's use that word. It is very, very true that we have there are a lot more people that are here, and a lot of them are working remotely. I know of plenty of them. But
I think we're mixing and matching, Mike.
I think so too.
I think we have to get back to the first thing we should be doing is trying to establish some definitions of what we're talking about. Frankly, whatever complications that hockey brings in terms of needed is a later discussion, I think. I think what the town is looking for, what we should be looking for as a planning board is, what is a short-term rental? Where are they allowed? That to me is what I thought this committee was going to deal with, not an analysis of what short-term rental looks like today.
I think Mike's point is that you don't want to set the bar too low or too high, however you look at it,
Right.
than the needs of local businesses understand. You have a different, you're gonna define it differently than most communities, I think. You're gonna need to.
But just for in terms of what we're speaking about now, with what you're researching, Mike, I believe the term would be less than 30 days, right?
Yeah, at a maximum, yes.
Yeah, I mean.
It is not unusual. We have friends that come in and rent for the month of August, for example, to come and play tennis. So it should be a month. I would use the word a month because some months are 31 days. But I would say that a month, anything that is less than a month or less would be short term. Anything over a month, I think, is not short term. I think is appropriate for our resort town.
Doesn't the state also have a definition of
They do.
short-term and long?
No,
There is
They
the
do.
state has a
in terms of
very
the-
long, really long 24-page thing,
I can
which I've
answer
actually
that,
read.
Mike, it's, there's one definition for, the rooms and meals tax, and there's another that falls under the building code. And so, and none of those apply to your zoning automatically. You need to define it in the zoning.
I read the document several times. It is very, very informative, has some interesting things in there. And a couple of associations asked me for copies of it, which I've given them.
What document is that, Mike?
That's the short term. There is a document, it's about 24 pages dealing with short term that actually has all the things you just talked about.
From who?
It's from the state.
Well, from who? Is it the municipal association or?
You're now asking me to remember that, and I don't remember which state agency. I've been looking at some goddamn many state agencies. But I can find it and forward it to you.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of, the guidance going around, it's all the same. It's gonna explain that it's defined one way for the building code and another way for the rooms and meals tax. And it's gonna talk about the court cases that establish that you can regulate it by defining it in your zoning.
Yeah, it is clear.
You
It is
also
clear with that.
regulate it by having a business permit that goes from the select board, but there's mixed legal opinions on, there's a couple towns doing that for just short-term rentals, but the municipal association attorney didn't advise one of my towns do that without doing it for all lots. So, and that might be an issue if you have to start inspecting and enforcing life safety codes for all lodging.
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple of attorneys as well. Because one of my friends, not here in Waterville, but in another resort town, here up in New Hampshire, basically was going to be moving their entire business to their home, their unit up in the resort town, and doing everything remotely. Is that a business? You know, my answer was yes, and with an attorney friend of mine. You know, but if you're doing everything inside, is that still a business? My answer is absolutely yes. Do we have things like that going on here? Yeah, we do.
Again, I was just talking about short-term rentals.
Rentals, yeah, there's a category area here.
Yeah.
So basically, short-term rental, my definition is a short-term rental is anything that's a month or less.
Okay, so for the goal for your group, assessing the availability and need within Waterville Valley for short-term rentals, is
Yes.
that a good starting point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Is it not our, it's the planning board's business to see that, well, ordinances are followed? And is it not the concern of the planning board whether short-term rentals changes the character of, say,
That's what we're
residential
doing.
zoning? Isn't that something we should be talking about? I mean,
Yeah,
whether,
But that's why we're starting this process, but I think it would be helpful to have as much information.
But how do we determine what we need for short-term rentals if we haven't defined short-term rentals and where they work and what zones we think they ought to be in?
Well, if we define short-term rentals as 1 month or less, I guess I'm
Have
not
we
sure.
agreed to that as a board? Has anyone researched?
That's what I've been recommending to communities, that you
Right.
get, a good definition is something offered in increments of 30 days or
Right.
less than 30 days. And I think an important part of Mike's findings, the length of time. You know, if you have these, it's not just a number, but it's how many days do you need this night number? And then that can drive how you define short-term rentals and what's allowed in the residential.
So you're saying in assessing the availability, we should also be assessing the average night stay? If possible?
I would say, you know, if Mike finds that you need 300 units for 60 days versus 240 days, right? Then you could consider allowing short-term rental for 60 days to be accessory to a residential use, right? If that's what you're trying to do, is balance the demand with what you put in the zoning, so that whatever you put in the zoning doesn't hurt local businesses. And you need to know how many days of the year you have those peaks.
So the seasonality has to be considered.
Yeah, I mean, and that's gonna help inform, because what you're gonna look at is after how many days is for renting my home out as a short-term rental, is it business and doesn't belong there, right? You're looking for that number.
Right. Okay, so is that all clear as mud now? So as a primary goal for the committee, assess availability and need, keeping in mind how people are using the short-term places that are available in terms of seasonality and average days.
You're gonna email that to me, right?
Well, I mean, it seems to be where the discussion went. How is the rest of the board feeling about that?
The other thing we have to remember is that we kind of have at least two prongs here. So that if you look at, for example, the average length of stay at Black Bear and Golden Eagle, you're gonna see that as one thing, whereas if you go out to, I don't want to pick on any in particular, but if you go out to Forest Rim and take a look at the people that rent at their units at Forest Rim, you're gonna see that's an entirely different, probably, length of time than, you understand what I'm saying? So there are at least those two very different situations that we have going on.
But I think the question, Mike, is
And you expect me to answer it?
how, I think the question's simpler than that. I think the question is, how many days of the year do local businesses need homeowners throughout town to be able to offer their homes as short-term rentals? How long is that peak?
Yes, Tara's point about how many days, the number of days is the critical factor, the tipping point. Is it a business of renting a second home for income, or is it that your home is available from time to time for friends and relatives to use?
Well, from what I'm hearing Tara's point being that businesses are very invested in having potential short-term rentals for, say, Massachusetts Vacation Week.
Well, that's what I'm hearing Mike say for the hockey tournament, how many homes need to be available as short-term rentals? Not rooms in hotels, but.
Yes, that's commercial. Why are we, I understand maybe for a basic census of what it is we have, but that's what they do,
Right.
right?
We don't
Right.
need to talk about hotels offering their rooms on Airbnb.
That's
part of
commercial.
use.
Airbnb
Something
is
is
broken,
fine.
right. I think what
I
I
have a
probably was
question.
trying to get at was
I have a-
residential area use.
Right.
I have a legal question. And I shouldn't ask this because all it's gonna do is lead to trouble. Rich, close your ears. If somebody is living in a residential zone and they rent their unit house out for the 6-month season, 6-month ski season, which a lot of people here do, that would be commercial by almost any definition.
No. And it's not short-term rental either.
It's not, wait a minute, it's clearly not short-term rental. 6 months is probably not short-term rental by anybody's definition.
Technically, it's 6 months in a day.
I think you're
Well,
gonna.
that's resident, that's to be a resident.
I think you're gonna wanna clarify that that's an okay accessory use of a dwelling.
But it is not currently.
It's vague currently, but I think anybody could argue in court that
I don't wanna go to court.
that's an accessory use of a residence in Waterville Valley.
Okay. Okay. Good, we don't wanna go there,
In any zone.
Yeah,
in any zone.
right.
That it is allowed, we may have to clarify that, but it
It's-
is allowable in any zone.
I think you should clarify all these things, but that's an ordinary use in a residential zone in Waterville Valley.
I agree. I'm not saying it shouldn't be.
What's
It should be.
what's not ordinary, but popped up all of a sudden is the Airbnb type. And I think my understanding of what your research is gonna help inform is, one way to look at the cutoff on that. Where to set the limit on that without hurting local businesses.
I have a question, Art, because when I spoke to my attorney friends, and they didn't agree. Some said that the town, and I know there are towns that have, outlawed is a bad word, but have prohibited, better word, Airbnb in their town. And other towns have said, we cannot do that. It is up to individual condo associations whether to do that. What is your view on that, Tara, or do you have one? Or should we care?
If short-term rentals are allowed, like in a district, under your lodging definition, and I'd have to put that sheet up again where I reviewed those, you can't outlaw a certain format.
That was my answer, but some people
Yeah.
argue that a town can do that because of, issues that some Airbnb allowed, but that's fine. Okay. I'm just adding it to my ever-growing list of headaches.
But really, I think the question that we're asking the group to answer, Mike, is just assessing the availability. And even though, of course, it's allowed in commercial hotels, that's part of the availability stock.
Yeah.
We need to have a good grasp on
Yes,
what's available.
I agree. I agree.
Any other points from anyone who hasn't spoken yet on this? No?
Good.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mike, for leading the charge on that. All right. Moving on in the agenda to our future meeting plans. I know last month we had agreed that Zoom seemed to be working well for us and is keeping us all safe. Had a conversation with Mark in the meantime that there may be a point at which the governor disallows electronic meeting. And we felt it was important to have a plan B, at least germinating in our minds as to if it would all feel safe, what the options would be if we're no longer allowed to meet electronically. And Mark, correct, or Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, we can have 4 board members physically present in a location and others come in electronically if it gets to that point, and it can still be a legitimate meeting.
We are doing that as a school board, just so that you're aware.
Yeah, you only need a quorum present
Yeah.
under ordinary rules.
I mean, obviously, school board, it's only 3 of us, but the school board is meeting physically, again, today, for example, and everyone else is coming in by Zoom.
And where are you meeting?
At the school.
Are you all wearing masks? How does that work for you?
Well, we have enough room in the school library to spread out more than 6 feet apart, but most of us wear a mask except when we're speaking.
Okay. And I just wanted to get a sense from the group, if we get to that point. So I know there are definite pros and cons to virtual versus in-person, and just see once more how everyone's feeling about the option of doing sort of a hybrid meeting, or just staying on Zoom.
I'm ready to go back to meetings as long as we meet physical meetings, as long as we meet the state requirements, 6 foot distance, masks, if unable, to keep 6 feet away, and frequent washing of hands. I guess would be the third thing, and that for those who feel uncomfortable with that, we could do a hybrid. They can Zoom in, I guess is the term. I know on a select board, we would call in if we couldn't physically make the meeting. We would call in and listen
Is
that way.
this a board meeting in person now?
No, we are still meeting on Zoom. But if the school board feels comfortable,
Well, I just to put my 2 cents in, I feel horribly uncomfortable meeting in person. As an example, this
you're the
morning.
boss.
Well, no, it's definitely not a monarchy. But this morning I got a call. One of my staff was potentially exposed, has been potentially exposed. So, going through the steps of closing, keeping her out until she can be tested, come back with a negative. but it was a matter of hours. Like if she had heard the news 10, 12 hours later, I would have been exposed. And I would never forgive myself being in a room and having some sort of aerosolization infect anybody else. I mean, everyone here is a volunteer, and no offense, but many at risk, and in the Irish age group, or for other reasons. And
Are you saying we're old?
not at all, not at all. Very, very wise.
No, she's saying we're sick, Mike.
Anyway, so that's sort of where my mindset is at. But, you know, I would like to know, you know, and of course, not only know for moving forward in the near term, but say 3 months from now, if we're no longer allowed to meet electronically, what a plan would be that everyone could live with.
You know, based on the science that's coming out now with the aerosolization and the fact that our buildings are old without great air handling, and the fact that people, that when they talk, they can take their mask off, which is exactly when you don't want to take your mask off. You know, my medical conditions, there's no way that I would ever go into an in-person meeting.
I agree.
That's my feeling, not that I am part of the decision, but
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not gonna go to any in-person meetings of planning boards until there's a effective vaccine with 2 family members in long-term care facilities.
Yeah. Have you seen other towns that are, Tara, for many of their boards?
I'm doing 6 of you on Zoom, 2 that just haven't met, period.
Wow, since March.
There's 1 that I haven't yet started a project because they're meeting in person with no masks.
wow,
So
I don't want to be on their board.
yeah,
Well, I mean, at the school, we have a distinct advantage because there's not very many of us and we can really spread out. And we want to check out certain things in the facility. But other than that, you know, a group this size, we should be Zooming as long as it is possible.
I think I've read the same things as Nancy, that they found that aerosols, the 6 feet is just moot.
Yeah, it's got to be more.
6 feet is no longer applicable.
They spread through the room pretty quickly.
Even when there is a vaccine, the likelihood is it's only going to be like the flu vaccine, about 60, 70% effective. So once we have it, I'll probably still be wearing a mask.
These are impossibly high standards, guys. I don't see us ever meeting in person again until the governor says we have to.
And we will probably be wearing masks for the rest of our lives.
Okay, so why would the governor insist that we meet in person? What's the logic of that?
Because we're a public board, we serve the people. And we have to have the public in front of us.
Yeah. It was an emergency ruling that he made.
And the New Hampshire legislature has been really behind the times on 91A. You know, we tried as the Connecticut River Joint Commission some years ago to get it so that boards who have to travel a distance, like on the Connecticut River Joint Commission, right, we're coming from Pittsburgh up by the Canadian line and Brattleboro, that didn't have to have a quorum in person, and we couldn't even get that passed.
So the governor thinks that we have to be before the public, which means then in public attendance, we expose ourselves to more people.
Well, it's
We don't know
the
anything
law.
about
It's the law. We're operating under an emergency order right now.
Right, it's not the governor, it's the legislature, it's 91A normally requires a quorum to be in person.
Yeah.
And to allow the public in the meeting room. So.
Right. So actually, you know, we don't want to, we should have to remember that Governor Sununu in his emergency order actually did a very good thing relatively quickly, all right, and has not changed it. And, you know, unless or until he does, we should definitely be doing it this way unless there's a reason not to.
It's extended 3 weeks at a time, so I always keep an eye on that every 3 weeks to
Yeah.
make sure it's been extended again before we all do our public notices.
We may want to just get used to hybrid at some point. I'm not arguing that we do it next meeting, but it's probably going to come down to that, at least for some of our members, and perhaps we should just see if it works at some point,
You know,
or how
clearly,
it works.
Why don't we wait till we have to?
we're encouraging that because it's enabling public to participate in some hearings that they wouldn't normally.
Right.
So are public giving feedback that they can't participate electronically easily? I mean, I understand for towns where there isn't a good infrastructure for internet, but it seems like our infrastructure here is quite strong. Have we received feedback that folks cannot attend?
Mark, have you gotten any feedback?
I would think that it's even easier to attend via Zoom than in person, especially for second homeowners who are probably not here.
Exactly.
Well, you know, this is the larger issue of the time we meet too.
Sure.
So we may not be getting feedback because, I mean, we had, I think, at max 14 people here and two were guests. We don't exactly usually get a lot of people.
All right, so what
We
I,
didn't get a lot of people at 6 p.m. either. So are you referring to time of day, Rich?
Yes, time of day. We discussed it off and on about 8 a.m. on a work day being a difficult time for people to attend a meeting. But that's a different discussion from what we're talking about.
All right.
so what I'm hearing mostly is that everyone is fine with continuing with Zoom, and if the governor or the legislature, I guess the governor revokes the emergency order, and if the legislature does not allow for electronic meetings, then we will cross that bridge. Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
All right. Then, unless there's any further discussion, we'll move on to committee reports. Real briefly, the town core group, we're still waiting on the lights and the signage for the village trail to be installed. It's just been slowed down with COVID. Construction has been slowed down. As well as waiting to hear back from the grant that's been applied for, but that will probably be another, what, 6 weeks? Is that right, Mark? Mid-September?
Yes.
So that's about where we're at.
We also should mention the permits that we've applied for the rock crossings. You want to talk about that, Wendy?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, in my mind, that was like 2 months ago that we had that discussion, but yeah, we're, as a way to help create a loop trail around the pond, one of the options, both for there as well as below the dam, we're looking at rock bridges, kind of like what's up in the Mad River Trail. So that those applications have been submitted. About how long should those take, Mark, to hear back?
I'm expecting a decision any day.
So not necessarily an all be all, because of course, part of our goal was great accessibility for everyone to be able to enjoy the trails, and you know, the rocks can make that a bit more challenging, but it's a possible low cost way, and we wanted to know all of our options.
Yeah, this will be a stepping stone crossing, just like we have in the Mad River. And it's at the entrance of Snow's Brook into Corcoran's Pond by Valley Road. And the other site is the old footbridge crossing between the conference center and the Snowy Owl.
And we haven't necessarily found or realized any challenges or overcome any challenges with assessing the actual stepping stones. You know, there's definitely some issues with
Yeah,
this history there, but the first step was just to see if it was possible before moving ahead to assess the cost for getting to the rocks.
Yep.
Okay.
Mark, are you gonna be eliminating that widening of the bridge, going over Snow's Pond? The access to the trail going up the slope at a camp, and then going across the bridge and then back down the slope again? Is this stepping?
no, we haven't changed any of that yet. I mean, we're definitely looking at the possibility of getting a footbridge across Snow's Brook closer down by the pond, permitted by DES, but we don't have anything definitive from them yet. Yeah, we would eliminate it if we can get an actual footbridge permitted. These stepping stones are intended to be only an interim solution. So hopefully we can do more on the permanent bridge situation. But we're trying not to do any more than we have to before the grant is decided on.
So Mark, are the rules on the bridges the same as what we were faced when we were in the Forest Service? That it's got to withstand a 100-year flood?
Yeah, all of those regulations are consistent for any bridges. And that's why we looked at submitted the cantilevered bridge as part of the grant application, because that's got sufficient flow space underneath the bridge to meet those requirements, Bill. So if DES were to come in and say, we don't have to meet those criteria anymore, then we could build a footbridge down by the pond a lot, pretty easily. It's just, it's what DES is willing to waive in their requirements. So this statutory permit by notification is it's like literally a 2-page easy application where you just describe the project in general terms and locate it where you want to build it on a map. And they look at it and say, yeah, that's a small enough project. It has no impact, so go ahead and build it. There's no engineering plans or anything as part of this SPN. So the crossing, the stepping stone crossing has no impact because the stones don't go anywhere if there's a flood. So we're hoping we can get the SPN for that. But they're also limited access. Only certain people can use them. So they are just a temporary measure.
All right. Anything from the Conservation Commission?
I'd like to back up, Wendy. I have a question for you on the core group.
Of course.
Has there been any more discussion on the sign entering Waterville Valley for the ski resort? It should be the ski area, excuse me.
There has not been any discussion with the town core group.
Do you think there's going to be any discussion? Is it what it is?
We can certainly bring it up. I'm not sure where the resort is at with that.
So they seem to be above the law in a sense.
Well, unfortunately, they did submit it for approval.
It was approved, John.
It was approved, John, the way that it is right now.
It's just the spirit of it was was, different than what we talked about in the town core group. But the wording was part of their application, so it's not necessarily an above the law thing, it's just trying to entice them to go with the spirit of what we've been looking for, and we'll continue that conversation.
Okay. I, for one, am not happy, that's all. I'll move on.
If we find the sign missing, we know where to come. Sorry, it's
You
been
do.
recorded.
You will.
Don't answer it. All right, Conservation Commission, since you're here, John?
So a couple of things. We've been in touch with Rick Vanderpool in regards to an issue on the property that's now for sale along the Valley Road. And a few of us have taken a walk on that property to look at the land that's got a lot of water on it. I think that that land has been purchased by, I forget her name, just above, they own a home just above that land. Is it Lucas? I think. That land has a lot of water on it, and our concern, so Mike Capel, myself, and one of the conservation people, Eric Levy, also walked this land and discovered that the new owner, Brian, that's going to build on that land is up sort of above that land. And what we're concerned with is all the water running down into that valley area. So the drainage is going to be extremely important on building these new condos. So I'd like to kind of maybe table this for discussion next time on the planning board to take another look at this. It's a concern that we have. I don't know if anybody else cares, but is Mike still there?
I'm still here for a little while. The issue is, and I walked up there prior to my operation, but I walked up there and we did see water, and the concern is there a wetlands type designation that should be done to it? Was it just rain? Did the bears pee there? We don't know what the answer is. We really should find out what the answer is prior to that lot being sold, because if someone is going to build there and there is a water issue, there's a mitigation issue, and all of a sudden, all kinds of lawsuits become.
So is the question whether that's designated as a wetland or not, is that unclear?
Is there any type of wetlands issue there? If there is, we should find out what it is and make sure what's there prior to anything happening with that lot.
Well, Mark, aren't all
Well,
those is Mark?
The wetlands are marked on the subdivision map.
Yes, they are. And
That
it is
was
not-
approved.
It is not so marked. I checked. It is not so marked, Mark.
The plat map has the wetlands on it.
Yep.
Each of in accordance with the subdivision plat that was approved, the building inspector, when he gets a building permit application, looks at the building envelope where they're actually locating the building, checking setbacks and checking to make sure that there's no infringement on the wetlands.
Correct.
There is no setback from the wetlands, so they can build right up to the edge of the wetlands.
True.
And as long as they meet the regulations as far as lot coverage and impervious material, he does all those calculations as well. And if they meet all of those criteria, then the building is allowed to go on. The contractor is required to mark the wetlands on site before the building inspector certifies that they're not in the wetlands. So,
Mark, I agree.
and
Mark,
they're,
Mark, this is the question. There is no wetlands marked on that lot.
no, there isn't yet, Mike, but it
Right.
gets marked. The wetlands get delineated on the site to match the approved subdivision map when he gets a building permit application. So that's having the wetlands delineated on the ground has never been done prior to that building permit application being put in.
So when the building permit is requested, is submitted, someone is going to go up and determine whether or not there should be additional wetlands determined on that lot.
No, the contractor actually goes out with flags and he marks the wetland boundaries.
Based on what's already been
I
established.
think what
But based
Mike
based
doesn't
on,
understand is that if there's no wetlands on the current map, then the contractor doesn't have to mark anything and nothing is considered wetlands, no matter how wet it is now.
that's correct.
That is correct. That was when I walked up there with John and Eric, there clearly was significant water standing there. Now, there can be all kinds of reasons why it's temporary. Absolutely true. The question that we were asking, that I was asking to the Conservation Commission was, okay, is it possible that there should be wetlands marked there that are not? And I asked that question to the Conservation Commission. I assume that's the proper place to ask it. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an engineer or whatever, environmental engineer or whatever type of person would go in and say, hey, this is just temporary water, it's meaningless, or there is an issue here. I don't have that kind of knowledge. That's not my field of expertise. All I said is, hey, somebody that has that level of expertise should take a look of this, because it is not so designated.
Okay,
And
so
it is good.
two issues, Mike, two issues. If the Conservation Commission has that problem, and John, you should communicate this to the Conservation Commission. If there is a concern, then the commission needs to write a letter to the selectmen and tell them that, because the building inspector works for the selectmen. Okay, so if there is a problem that the Conservation Commission feels, they need to put it in writing and tell the selectmen that. That's number one. And number two, if the Conservation Commission feels that the planning board is not doing their job with having a plat map that accurately delineates wetlands, then the Conservation Commission needs to take that up with the planning board. And
I agree.
they need to tell you what you're doing wrong, and we need to work on the process of communication between the Conservation Commission and the planning board. Because right now, a certified wetland scientist, okay?
Nice term.
Well, that's what it is.
No, I shouldn't have said it that way.
I'm just saying that if he looks on a map and the flags on the ground match what is on the map, then that is all he can do. He cannot, and we have never gone back to a developer or to a property owner and said, we're changing the wetlands configuration of your lot after a subdivision has been approved.
Can we do that? I mean,
No,
yeah,
I don't know. Tara would have to tell us if we can do that, but I've never heard of it. Maybe
Mark,
I
I hate to say this, I'm just a poor dumb accountant.
I
All
have
I
to
did
take
was
another
look and see
call.
water.
I have to take another call, but I can hop back in. I I wouldn't think there's a mechanism for changing that later, no.
Right, so
And
we've gotta go with what's delineated.
it sounds like what I'm hearing is it possibly is stormwater runoff, right, from another lot.
That's the issue, is the runoff to,
Is the water on that lot going where it was supposed to in its plan?
That is one other thing that Chris looks at to make sure he has the property owner's engineer who's doing their building certify that the runoff to adjacent properties is not being changed in accordance with the regulation, right? Because you can alter terrain and you can put in driveways and buildings, but you can't increase the amount of runoff, right? So you gotta build detention areas or do whatever you need to do to make sure that the amount of runoff at a certain rate is the same post-construction as it was pre-construction. And we actually have a lot that we are having the engineers go back because they have not provided that calculation to us. And there's a significant amount of earth movement getting the site ready for the house. And so we have required them to get a certification with a professional engineer stamp that says that the runoff is equivalent. So
And
that's,
even apart from any town regulations, if you're draining onto someone else's property,
that's right. That's a state.
Yeah.
It's a private property issue.
Right,
You need a drainage easement.
right.
I'll be more, I'm not shutting your meeting off, but I've gotta
Okay,
step away.
but John, does that address is that okay? We can have that conversation at the Conservation Commission and get something to the selectmen if there's an issue here?
yes,
Is that okay?
yes.
I'll talk to you later, John.
Yep, I still think there needs to be more discussion about this, because it's been overlooked for too long. And we do have Rick Vanderpool coming to take a look, and I'll talk to you about that more, Mark, at a different time.
Hey, Mark, can I
Yeah.
ask a question? I thought not the current Conservation Commission, but the old one, before where it was disbanded, had a study where they identified all of the wetlands in the
That's
valley.
right, yeah.
And that's, what are we're no longer relying on that?
We are relying on that but that was those wetlands that were approved by planning board
Yeah.
should have had the wetlands identified on it per that wetland study. Yeah,
That study, right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
so you
Yeah,
guys need to review that.
Yeah, we
I did.
want to make sure that that's what people are referring to. I mean, we have a habit of, we do the work and then we say the work was wrong. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into that, and I am for one not going to, in favor of revisiting the area of wetlands again.
Hold on, can I speak, please? Thank you.
No.
So listen, the real issue here on that land is the runoff.
Yeah.
We really need to take an official stance on this, on that runoff, and make sure it's done right, because once they build that, all that water is gonna run right down into that little bit of valley, a piece of land that already has a lot of water on it right now. Whether somebody marked that on wetlands or not, I guess it doesn't matter now, but the runoff is a real huge issue over there. That's what I'm trying to say.
And so,
Okay,
you were saying for that to be addressed,
Potentially.
Look, this is not a planning board issue. This is a Board of Selectmen issue, and Rich can take it back to the Board of Selectmen. And we can, like I said, the Conservation Commission can tell the selectmen that they are concerned about this. But if we have a stamped plan by an engineer that says that the runoff that is coming off of that when the house is built is the same as what comes off of it today, we are taking that engineer stamp. And if the
Yes.
Conservation Commission with that, then that's a conversation they need to have with the selectmen. That's not a planning board issue. Okay, this is between the Concom and the Board of Selectmen.
Mark, let me summarize what you just said. The Conservation Commission has to put in writing what their concern is and submit it to the Board of Selectmen, and then whatever will happen, will happen. Does that summarize it?
Yeah, I mean, the Board of Selectmen are the ultimate responsible board to make sure that the, wait a minute.
Yep.
Like Bill said, what was approved in the plan is what we have to use. We can't go back 2 years later and change what we're going to allow. We have to go by what was approved. So whatever level of detail you guys want to have in your subdivision approvals, we'll live with. But if they use what was approved and they can show the calculations, then we got to let them build it,
I understand.
regardless of changing conditions or whatever the situation is.
I understand.
Our next, John, our next select board meeting is next Wednesday. If you think you guys would be ready to discuss it, we can certainly have it as an agenda item. No problem whatsoever.
We will, thank you.
And does the Conservation Commission have that copy of the wetlands map that was built out before?
I believe we do.
I know we've been running late, but Nancy had attended a solid waste roundtable, and I was hoping we could squeeze in. Oh, did she walk away? Oh, there she is. Just a brief recap.
Let's end on solid waste. Good timing, Wendy.
Because 2020 isn't enough of a challenge. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so I attended a video conference back in July 29th about solid waste run by the North Country Council. And Derek Crothers, who's our associate planner on the Regional Planning Commission. And the first thing I wanted to say was it just couldn't have been a nicer group of people. I was, I mean, I expected them to be nice, but I was shocked at how nice they were. So I just wanted to give that a plug. And then Jim Mayhew had a few questions that the town wanted answered, so I can answer that for the planning board too, in case we have the same questions. One of them was, what's the update on the Bethlehem landfill, which is operated by Casella that we're using right now. It is permitted and running through April of 2021, which is not that long away. And it has been denied an extension application through 2023, but they're trying still to extend that. And the alternatives are Coventry, Vermont, and Rochester, New Hampshire, as the most likely candidates.
Is that denied by the town, Nancy? Is that correct? Bethlehem?
No, it was denied by the state DES.
Yeah.
State.
By the state.
Thank you.
No, Bethlehem, I think, loves the convenience and has to put together and actually sent to us their plan for what to do if the landfill gets closed down, and it's going to cost them a lot of money. So they're not looking forward to it either.
Yeah, Nancy, question. So what was the feeling, like a percent feeling of the possibility of extending beyond April 21? Because the last thing I had was that don't worry about April 21, the state's gonna allow you to continue to use Bethlehem until they figure this out at the state level, which is the two bills with the study committees that you outlined in your write-up.
Wait.
So is that not the case?
Did Casella give you that? Because that's not the sense I get. I got that people are worried about it and they're putting together the written plans for what to do when it happens.
Well, we were very worried about it until, yes, it was Casella that told us, don't worry, but because this is going backwards 6 months now. And in the COVID world, oh my word, we're talking about increasing our costs here substantially.
Perhaps even another truck.
Another truck, more people. I mean, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes, it's going to increase everyone's costs substantially. And everyone recognized and wants a regional solution that's better. And so, one of the things that I asked for was, well, gee, do you have any ideas for short-term solutions for us? And they brainstormed for us. One of them was asking nearby towns if we could, they could take our recyclables, but Campton Thornton was on the line. And of course the answer is sorry, no. And the other is source reduction. And they had some ideas for that. One of them was pay as you throw, and other towns are doing this where you can't just throw your trash in, you have to have special bags that you purchase, and that reduces a lot of the trash. Although it took Bethlehem 2 years to implement, so I don't think it's probably reasonable for us to get that going before.
Well, the other part of a pay as you go, because I ran a pay as you go system in Farmington, you have to have a very robust recycling program, because you have to give people an alternative to throwing the trash away so that they'll reduce the amount of trash. And we're not going to have that.
They suggested looking, no one is using it, but they suggested looking into the Prima America plastics to diesel plant in Groveton, New Hampshire. I don't know if we are able to do that. They say that they take town plastics for free and they pay for half the transportation. That's what I was told. So it's an idea.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of stuff. Number 2, number 4, number 5, plastic bags, shrink wrap, rigid plastic, black plastic, rigid tape. It was originally developed for agricultural plastics, but they take a lot of stuff. So that's one idea. And the other is to really push for some sort of regional composting. Because we all know that it's a great idea, but it's difficult to impossible to do on a local basis because of the problem with wild animals. Right now we're having a real problem with bears, and we're not even composting. But it's something that we ought to be pushing really hard and working with the North Country Council to push and try to get some money for, maybe within the establishment of the solid waste working group at the state level.
Do we know why the state wants to shut?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of politics and everything else involved, but I am shocked, quite frankly, when I read your write-up, Nancy. Like I said, this is going backwards months, and I've gotten no indication that this was even a thing anymore. I mean, I really honestly thought that it had been put to bed until 23. And, to have 5 months, 6 months before we have to implement something is it's beyond me. I just can't believe that the state has gone back to this position.
Well, yeah.
This is a major planning problem. This
Yeah.
is, like I said, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes, I agree. I don't disagree. So, I mean, you see that the other towns, you know, like Bethlehem, are planning pretty carefully for it because they see it coming up pretty soon. So their recommendations are to do anything we can to divert as much waste as possible from having to be shipped elsewhere.
Nancy, is this a
But let me
planning board
just
thing or a select board issue?
Well, no, this is, I think it's both, Mike, because
Okay.
this, I mean, just like diversion, because this goes back to the CIP, right? And Mike's whole thing about, or Rich's whole thing about opening this up and having to change it substantially. But just as an example, to divert anything in our current setup is not really any more of a cost savings for us because of the way we collect the trash, right? And
Well,
we don't have any place. So if, as an example, the whole thing with plastics to diesel, yeah, you can take the plastics out of the waste stream, which would save you some cost. But the problem is, how do you collect it? How do you get it to Prima? How, you know, so we don't have any land to do the diversion. So a town like Bethlehem would, well, I'm assuming they have a place set aside in their public works area or whatever, where they're going to set this up to do the diversion.
they said that they were going, I mean, in that plan, they when they have to move to, not using the Bethlehem landfill, they're going to convert their town garage into a transfer station and park their vehicles outside.
Yeah, well, we just spent $800,000 not parking them outside.
Yeah, but
It'll be more than that too. It'll be manning, it'll be
Yeah, it'll
hours.
be manning.
Wait till the snow comes and they.
Well, and it's not only that, folks, it's remember the large transient population. And so if you are trying to set aside all the plastics, you've got to make sure that the all the lodges are on board. They have the staffing to make sure that, so we're not going to solve it today, but.
they had some more suggestions, which is one, we can make it very clear to our transient population that we request that they take their garbage out with them. We can gate our trash facilities so that they're not open on the weekends. And then we can, just man them for only a few hours so that, it's basically just locals that are able to throw our trash away. So we're not getting as much trash as we usually get.
It'll just be piled up in front of the fence.
Well,
But
those
anyway,
were ideas.
Yes,
Yeah.
I read that and okay. So how is your group that had this discussion tracking where everybody is with this? Or are they? Oh, you froze.
Uh-oh.
Nancy, come back.
You might want to turn off your video, Nancy, so we can at least hear your audio. Uh-oh.
Oh, she dropped.
Two of us
No!
guys, come on. Get this thing here.
All right. Well, anyway, we will watch this, but yes, this is a planning board issue as well as everything else.
Well, and with the CIP, we usually start looking at that in September, is that right?
That's correct.
Should we move that up to August?
You're in your August meeting.
Oh my gosh, we're in August now. How is it? I'm sorry. Okay. do
So-
anything earlier in September.
No, we won't be ready. We're not gonna be ready to do that.
And are we clear with who's on the CIP committee?
Who is
Everyone's
it?
still willing to jump in? Can you raise your hand if you're on the CIP committee? Bill Spence,
I was last year.
Rob,
Does it roll over?
if you're so willing. Terry, weren't you on it? Wait.
As long as it doesn't interfere with, all the other stuff, because by hopefully after today, I'm not gonna be as encumbered by school board. I should be able to, help on that too. We're not doing any traveling, obviously.
I was on the committee, but I'm not sure I still am. Am I, Mark?
Yes, you are.
I
So
don't-
it can only be three.
Oh,
It can
good.
only be three.
Good, then I don't have,
So Bill,
Bob-
Terry, and Rob.
perfect.
Okay. I will reach out to you soon, gentlemen.
Super. Okay, and if, welcome back, Nancy. Oh, you're still connecting. There you are.
Did you hear my question, Nancy, about?
Yeah, sorry, my computer ran out of power just as you asked the question. How is the group tracking this? We didn't leave it as, okay, we're gonna meet again in a month, or we're gonna have a set up a group chat. So I think the thing to do is either you or Jim Mayhew or whatever, we should probably connect with Derek Carruthers, who set up the meeting, to find out, if he's gonna have any other meetings or send out any more information.
Yeah, I will.
Trying to think of a way to characterize this news, but nothing is coming to mind, Nancy.
Yeah.
Characterize the news? Yeah, 2020. Just put it under 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, just one more.
I was thinking of something a bit more earthy.
I'm saving that for our conversation after, Rich.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah, not good.
Well, thank you for tuning into that, Nancy, and keeping us all in the loop.
Sure.
All right. Any other communications that we wouldn't have had, Nick?
Mark, I had a quick question for you. Was there any engineers reports on the roads yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I do not have any communications.
Okay. Well, I believe we have covered everything, unless if anyone needs any other questions, points of interest. If not, I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to.
I'm sorry, before Nancy, sorry to interrupt, but can we confirm next meeting date?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Monday. So it would be September 10th? Right?
Right.
Okay.
I think Wendy is frozen now.
Okay. She is.
But take over, Nancy.
Hey, so I'd like to hear, does anyone have a motion to call the meeting?
I so moved. This is Rich.
Do I hear a second?
Second the motion?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you very much.
Sorry, everyone. Thank you, Nancy.
Bye-bye.
Wendy.
The
Bye.
recording has stopped.